Chapter 8:16, Conflict at the Sea. Although Guyen wanted to stay with Tang Xiu for a while, she was, after all, being plagued with her injury and finally left despite no matter how reluctant she was. Tang Xiu himself directly passed the task of training Cheng Xueme to Gu Xiaoxue and then stayed inside the subaquatic corvette to cultivate silently. In the blink of an eye, Tang Xiu and Cheng Xueme were on the island for the third day. Tang Xiu was unaware that hundreds of nautical miles from his location, two passenger ships boarded by Tang Guisheng and the members of the first and second guardian squads of the Tang family, were sailing through the winds and waves towards the Strait of Malacca. The sea was rough and full of turbulent waves, yet Tang Guisheng stood straight on the front deck of the liner. His eyes sparkled, yet they were cold and frosty. The bad news from Duanmu Lin was nearly impossible for him to accept. He was determined to find his grandson, Tang Xiu, even if he had to annihilate that underwater vestige. He must see his grandson if he lived, but even if his grandson was dead, he also must see his dead body. Report. A loud voice came outside the door. Tang Min, who was behind Tang Guisheng, opened the door and then saw the first guardian squad captain, Tang Rong, there. She then asked with a deep voice, "Any issues?" "We spotted a fleet through our telescope, to our front on the left. 2 cruisers, a destroyer, and a medium-sized passenger ship. Judging from the sign on the ship's hull, it should be the France fleet," reported Tang Rong. Tang Guisheng turned around and looked at Tang Rong, who was about to head out, and asked, "According to the information from Duanmu Lin, the France team that entered 3-star vestige was completely annihilated inside, is that right?" "Yes." Tang Rong nodded quietly. "There's no need to contact them since the France team members all died," said Tang Guisheng coldly. "Do proceed with caution and stay alert, however. Those French failed to get anything good this time and are likely to be displeased right now. Be careful of any provocations they might send us." "I understand." Tang Rong nodded discreetly. He then turned around and walked outside. Just as he had walked a few steps, a youth came running towards him and said in a heavy voice, "Captain, the liner ship from the France fleet separated from the rest of the fleet and is now racing towards our position. Notify everyone. Avoid that liner as much as possible and do not engage them. We'll change the plan if they keep chasing us," ordered Tang Rong in a deep voice. More than 20 minutes later. Although the 2 liners of the Tang family had deviated from the planned route and were about to take a detour to avoid the other party, the latter still attempted to intercept the 2 passenger ships. Therefore, Tang Guisheng personally came to the pilot house. Although he didn't want to get into trouble, trouble had come knocking his door. His character was someone who never gave second chances, as he ordered in a deep voice, "Open communication with them and ask them what they really want." After a while, Tang Rong reported with a grim face, "Patriarch, the other party asked us to stop sailing and demanded to inspect our ships." Killing intent burst out in Tang Guisheng's eyes as he growled, "This is international waters. What rights do those French liners have to inspect us? Tell them to leave at once, else we will take it as a provocation and attack." Tang Rong concurred and communicated with the other party. After it was finally determined that the other party had no goodwill toward them, Tang Guisheng fell silent for a few seconds and ordered the ship to stop. As the other party's liner approached, Tang Guisheng appeared on the deck with more than a dozen of people. After he came there, he clearly saw that more than a dozen people were similarly standing on the other passenger ship, led by a stocky man whose face was completely covered with a hood and who wore a sheathed saber on his waist. The rest of the more than a dozen people at his side were also armed with cold weapons, most of which were sabers and long swords. Prepare for battle. Tang Guisheng might be old, but he was still a decisive man. He immediately issued the command upon seeing the weapons carried by the other party. Whoosh! 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 4 figures streaked forward from the other liner with breakneck speed. They were just like launched arrows. They traversed over 20 meters without borrowing any power as they straightly arrived in front of Tang Guisheng. At the moment when the four of them made a defensive stance, the stocky leader soared midair to fly and then stood in front of the four men in just a breath. Humph. Chinese, huh? The strong man coldly snorted with more killing intent in his eyes. Tang Guisheng looked at the stocky man as if he was facing a formidable enemy and said in a deep voice, "We're Chinese indeed. You French didn't get anything good from the 3-star vestige and are now running amok and giving us trouble? You're really asking for death." The stocky man replied mockingly, "I never thought that you would know about the 3-star vestige. Seems like you have quite the stature. Maybe those 4 Chinese who came out from the 3-star vestige are hiding in your ship." Hiding? Tang Guisheng sneered, "Why should our Chinese experts need to hide? Since you don't need to hide anything, then why do you look like you're hiding something?" retorted the stocky man scornfully. "Take them out and hand over the things they obtained from the 3-star vestige and I'll keep your bodies intact. Else, don't blame me for being ruthless when I completely annihilate all the people on your 2 ships. Depending on you?" Tang Rong paced a few steps forward and heavily punched the stocky man. He was an elite expert trained by the Tang family since childhood and had broken through to the level of martial arts grandmaster at the age of 35, and then he retired from the army. After over a year of cultivation, he reached the peak of a martial arts grandmaster 6 months ago, and was sent to the Everlasting Feast Hall where he finally broke through to a higher level after some inhumane training. At present, he was comparable to a middle-stage qi refining expert. Faint surprise could be seen flashing in the stocky man's eyes. A burst of flames suddenly formed as he raised his hands and threw the flames forward to clash with Tang Rong's heavy punch. Boom. Tang Rong's complexion greatly changed. The blazing heat caused his fist to turn red the moment his punch clashed with the flame. The 2 fire dragons broke free from the flame and moved along his arm to blast his chest. One strike and Tang Rong, who was at the middle stage qi refining expert, was heavily blown and severely injured by his opponent. The stocky man didn't continue attacking after winning the bout but arrogantly mocked, "You still want to strike me with just that trivial strength of yours? You've bitten off more than you can chew. I already warned you before. Hand over the things you got from the 3-star vestige, else I'll butcher every one of you." Tang Guisheng's expression drastically changed. Never did he expect that this stocky man turned out to be an elementalist, even a horrifyingly powerful one. All the experts he brought today were the strongest armed forces of the Tang family. Among them, Tang Rong was ranked among the best. Yet, Tang Rong was so easily defeated and was heavily injured by them? At this time, Tang Guisheng felt somewhat bitter inside. What was his stature? Apart from the Amur tiger before, when and where had he been forced to eat such bitter abuse? Father. Tang Min led 2 men and 2 women as they appeared next to Tang Guisheng with a bit of worry on her face. She propped up Tang Rong first and then looked at Tang Guisheng. Tang Guisheng inhaled deeply but didn't pay attention to Tang Min. Instead, he stared at the stocky man and said, "You're indeed very powerful, but what about the rest of your people? Are they as powerful as you? I have a similar number of experts on my 2 ships, no less than you. You want to eradicate us, but are you sure your men can last to the end? You? Causing heavy losses for us? Just depending on you?" The stocky man mocked, "When did you Chinese learn shit to scare people with, huh? Do I need to say anything just to scare you people?" spat back Tang Guisheng coldly. "If you really think so, bring it on. It's the high seas here, it will be easy to destroy the corpses and leave no trace. I really want to see who will be utterly annihilated, me, or your men." The stocky man looked hesitant. Although he was very confident about his men, the enemy he just fought was by no means weak. At least, there were only 3 people among his men who were stronger than that man. If these Chinese had many people stronger than the man he just fought, easily killing them was out of the question. I want to get the things you Chinese obtained from the 3-star vestige, not to kill you. Hand them over, and we'll leave immediately. I don't need to say that you've found the wrong people. Even if we do have those things, I would never hand them over to you, replied Tang Guosheng in a deep voice. The stocky man was silent for a moment and then said slowly, if so, then I'll take a step back. Divide the things you've obtained equally with us. We can share it if it's technological products. Old man, this is the most I can offer you, don't even try to challenge it. Are you sure we have some items from 3-star vestige? Asked Tang Guosheng. I am sure, answered the stocky man bluntly. Tang Guosheng took a deep breath, then stepped back a few steps and roared, everyone, listen to me. If these people dare to attack us, strike back at once. We already plan to go out without hoping to come back. If we must die today, we shall die. But we must drag them to the hell with us. Yes. Tens of members of the first and second guardian squads of the Tang family appeared from the cabin one after another, for a total of 62 people, but 61 that could enter the fight. Tang Guosheng was also aware of the 2 men and 2 women brought by Tang Min. He knew that these people were very powerful as they were experts Tang Xiu sent to protect the Tang family. You fucking old shit. The stocky man cursed furiously and raised his hand. 2 fire dragons instantly formed in his hands as he paced forward and waved his arms, sending the aggressive fire dragons to flush forward towards Tang Guosheng. Chapter 8:17, Fierce Battle at High Seas. Tang Guosheng's countenance changed and Tang Min was flustered. She hastily ran to the front of Tang Guosheng and shouted, kill them. The 2 men and 2 women who had been standing behind Tang Min moved in a flash. One of the women instantly appeared in front of Tang Min and released a dreadful aura. The long sword she always carried in the scabbard on her back was jettisoned upward immediately. The moment she brandished it, she created a layer of swaying sword images. A storm blasted out in a flash, which simulated the water to billow upward from both sides of the liner. The rolling, billowing waves were accompanied by layers of sword images that instantly swept across the 2 fire dragons. The stocky man only felt darkness in front of him as his 2 fire dragons were torn apart and shattered by the bombardment, creating splashes of flame everywhere. Yet, the oncoming sword images were still on their path to strike him head-on. His pupils shrunk and he forcefully pushed his hands forward. Wall of fire. Layers of overlapping flames rapidly coagulated and stretched densely like a cobweb, eventually forming a thick wall of fire. The rolling flame kept flowing and was injected into the wall of fire when it then pressed forward toward the sword images. Boom. The stocky man shook and staggered while backing up in that instant. At the moment when the 2 streams of fire formed above the sea, he flew back to their passenger liner. The 4 French ability users behind him, however, unleashed their powers one after another, forming a whistling cyclone which was entangled with water arrows. The 2 powers complemented each other, causing their speed to increase to the max, and they aggressively strode forward at the moment when the wall of fire was destroyed. Blast. The 4 people were thrown back upside down by the rolling waves. But at the moment when they were blown away, several strops of wind were released by the wind elementalist on the passenger liner behind them, wrapping their bodies and taking them back to their liner deck. The middle-aged woman who just brandished the sword paced back for 3 steps in order to stabilize herself. Her sharp eyes were tightly locked on the stocky man and she sneered, "Humph, such weak ability users, yet you dare to waylay in broad daylight? Surely not all Frenchmen are as wild and unbridled as you?" The stocky man's expression turned a bit ugly, and he likewise glared back at the middle-aged woman and growled, "Who the hell are you? What power did you just use, and how can it be that powerful?" The middle-aged woman just sneered in response and ignored him. Instead, she looked at the surprised Tang Min and nodded at her, then returned to her previous position behind. "Do the others have similar strength as you?" asked Tang Min hurriedly. "More or less, yes," answered the middle-aged woman. "If the 4 of you join forces, Can you kill their leader? Asked Tang Min once again. I would need some major effort to do so if it's me alone, but the collateral damage would destroy the ship. If two of us join forces, it would be enough to eliminate him. And he would never leave this sea again even if he had 2 lives if the 4 of us join hands. The middle-aged woman nodded. Then what are you waiting for? Just kill them immediately, these French are really screwed, said Tang Min excitedly. Don't act for now, said Tang Guisheng quickly. They have too many people and their strength is not something to scoff at. I'll tell them to retreat first, it wouldn't be too late for you to act if they refuse. The power of the middle-aged woman sent by his grandson, Tang Xiu, truly shocked him. He thought that Tang Xiu had neglected these people. It made Tang Guisheng instantly remember that his grandson told him that all core members of the Everlasting Feast Hall were Taoist cultivators. At this time, he looked at the elementalists on the enemy's ship. His fear and dread were no longer there as he lifted his head up and stared at the stocky man. He then shouted heavily, "This is your last warning. Back off at once. Else I will fulfill the threats you gave me, but on you." Although the stocky man was a bit perplexed, he was fearless. He still had some deadly cards up his sleeve, so he boisterously laughed at the warning. "Humph, you want to scare us away by depending on that old hag? Old man, your old fossil head seems to have been kicked by a donkey, wasn't it? Water flood, your turn." "No problem." A hot, voluptuous woman with a willow-like slender waist and provocative attire paced a few steps forward. With the sound of delicate laughter, drizzles suddenly began to pour down from the sky. At the same time, 6 men and women in azure attire and holding various types of weapons came from behind her and rose in the air. Around the liner they were boarding, the already billowing sea surface suddenly became more violent and the wind increased in intensity. Then, water columns shot up to the sky for a total of 72 pillars, and they absorbed the drizzles around them amid their extreme rotations. "Be careful. Don't let the ship be flipped over." Tang Min, who was standing on the deck, swayed a few times. In that instant, the 4 men and women who had long swords on their backs flashed forward like shooting shells and instantly appeared on the ship in front. Their 4 long swords were immediately spinning and mixing with each other, instantly forming a 4-division sword array. This was followed by a burst of horrifying aura which caused the increasingly dense water columns around them to become slightly distorted. Sword shadows, light stream. An overwhelming sword light that blotted out the sky held forward towards the enemy ship. The 4 figures behind the sword light then stirred up the void in the surroundings and formed an exceptional dark space. The seemingly alive water columns were rushing to attack them, but the violently spinning sword light gradually turned the sea into a terrifying space of endless heavy rain. 10,000 meters away from the battle scene, a cargo ship was floating on the sea, containing a man and a woman dressed in black tuxedos standing atop its roof. The man was tall and handsome yet forceful, while the woman was tender and charming. They were looking at the sea in the distance as though they were able to see through the void. They turned out to be watching the scene of the battle over 10,000 meters away. If my guess is correct, those 4 should be the Chinese legendary Taoist ascetics, Dorit. Only those kinds of people would be able to unleash such a powerful combat power, said the delicate and pretty woman with a smile as she teased the hair on her temple with her lily-white hands, adding a mature charm to her femininity. "Humph, they are the so-called Chinese ascetics indeed," snorted Dorit. "I once met a brat who was stronger than those 4. But that brat was too wild and arrogant, so my master and his senior brother joined hands to kill him. I wouldn't have let my master die at that time due to his heavy injuries if I had possessed my current strength." "I don't think so." The belle shook her head and said, "Your master used to be a very powerful ability user in our country, the United States. He also participated in the Crusaders' Eastern Expedition. Even currently, you are not as good as he once was. Though he passed away due to his severe injuries, you still wouldn't be able to replace the version of him when he died. In any case, those French ability users are quite capable, like that water flood I'm quite acquainted with. I once fought and defeated her, and I know that the 6 behind her are all ability users of the water attribute. Their combined abilities lead to a drastic increase in power, more than tenfold. So, what do you think? Who will win the showdown in the end, the Chinese or those French elementalists? No matter who is stronger or weaker, they will not be the ones who will be the final winner, said Dorrit apathetically. Those French didn't get anything in 3-star vestige, but those Chinese obtained quite a lot. We can't do anything to them on Haiben Island, but here. We have to get the things they obtained from the 3-star vestige. The delicate Belle smilingly replied, let me do it, but know that you'll still have to pay the price. Humph. I know what you want. Dorrit snorted. You want the water attribute crystals, don't you? I'll give them to you. If you're still not satisfied, I'll find someone to help you manufacture a water attribute wand after going back. The Belle's eyes lit up and replied without hesitation, deal. Back to the battle scene. The 4 experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall had fully unleashed their powers, and no matter how imposing and majestic the scenes created by the combined powers of Water Flood and the other water elementalists were, they were still far inferior to the 4 divisions' sword array. Even the French ship was smashed with dozens of fractures created by the sword chops from the violent sword array. The array alone seemed like it was about to solve the predicament, judging by the appearance of the whole ship. Move and seize their ship. The stocky man roared and hurled toward the 4 experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall. At the same time, the tens of other ability users soared and unleashed each of their powers one after another, launching a fierce attack toward the Tang family. The battle was brutal and ruthless, with combatants dying here and there. Despite fighting each other to the death at this time, both sides were trying not to damage the ships. They were aware that whichever side survived the battle would still need the ship to leave this place. Hundreds of nautical miles away from the battle scene was a yellow sand island. Tang Xiu was silently sitting cross-legged on a reef, continually absorbing the star force from outer space. With his diligent cultivation, his star's tyrannical body cultivation became more profound, and he was only 2 layers away from achieving perfection. Kacha, kacha. A robot bee flickered its metal wings and landed in front of Tang Xiu. As its claws landed on the reef, it finally ejected out some holographic footage. As Tang Xiu opened his eyes and watched the scene displayed on the holographic footage, his complexion instantly changed. His fingers slid from the virtual screen as a series of strange symbols emerged, the characters and numbers of the Posteret galaxy. The numbers displayed the exact distance from his position to the location of the scene displayed on the holographic screen. You too, come back. Tang Xiu's figure soared in the sky and looked down, and he shouted to Gu Xiaoxue and Cheng Xueme from 2 kilometers away. After some time passed, 2 figures sprinted quickly. Cheng Xueme, who sprinted after turning off her gravity suit, was now able to control part of her power. Although her speed was much slower than that of Gu Xiaoxue's, she was already delighted with it. You called for us, Grand Master? Asked Gu Xiaoxue. Tang Xiu instantly flew toward the subaquatic corvette anchored on the shore and left his voice behind. Return to the subaquatic corvette at once. Our people are being attacked hundreds of nautical miles away from us. We must rescue them immediately. Our people? Gu Xiaoxue's complexion changed. Her figure flashed and instantly appeared next to Cheng Xueme. Her white lily-like hands grabbed Cheng Xueme's collar and she took her to dash to the subaquatic corvette. Who are our people that we need to rescue, Grandmaster? Quickly asked Gu Xiaoxue as she appeared at Tang Xiu's side. Chapter 818, One-Sided Massacre. With a dark expression, Tang Xiu swiftly tapped on the virtual keyboard in front of the console of the subaquatic corvette. The submarine cruised quickly for a few kilometers before it sank to the depths of the sea. Its power suddenly increased, and it cruised at the speed of lightning towards the passenger ship hundreds of nautical miles away. The hundreds of nautical miles only took a few minutes for the subaquatic corvette to travel, yet the battle on the ships had become more intense than ever. The French ability users had been unleashing various powers and victory was faintly leaning to their side. Go away. The situation of the stocky man, however, was different. Although his men had killed or struck heavy losses to the members of the Tang family's first and second guardian squads, he was gradually struggling under the attacks of the two experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall. He was now facing a crisis in which he could meet his maker or be severely injured at any time. The other two experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall were now protecting Tang Guisheng and Tang Min. They didn't suffer any injuries, yet seeing how their family's most elite experts kept dying or were severely injured one after another, their hearts had dropped. 10,000 meters away. Atop the roof of the cargo ship the French ability users used to board, Dorit was standing with his hands folded behind his back and eyes sparkling as he watched the gradually weakening Tang family. He nodded and slowly said, "Those French ability users are still seriously difficult to deal with. Back when France was still gathering ability users, they spent quite a huge investment to train them, and it seems like it has paid off. The Chinese may have those 4 experts, but 2 of them are left to protect some people. They don't dare to move casually. From the looks of the battle, it won't be long before most of those Chinese experts are killed or are seriously injured. But those French ability users won't end up better. The final outcome will be a situation where both sides suffer great losses." The bell chuckled and said, "Killing each other and dying. The harder they fight, the easier it will be when we act, don't you think? Well, the Chinese have a common saying, a sandpiper tussles with a clam, but the fisherman catches both. We should be that fisherman, don't you think?" Dorit glanced at the beauty and indifferently said, "Quite unexpected of you. I never thought that you'd have so much knowledge of Chinese culture. So what next? You planning on organizing some punitive expedition to the east or something?" The belle rolled her eyes and snapped, "I'm not tired of living happily yet. Why on earth should I organize some Orient punitive expedition, huh? Besides, it's not yet time for the ability users to stand at the peak of humanity, to begin with. Ordinary guns may not pose a threat to us, but what about more powerful weapons? Especially, the secret weapons of all countries, the laser guns." Dorit's expression became a lot more serious. He nodded and said, "The exploration conducted by various countries to the various vestiges has caused a gradual progression in their science and technology research, making them more powerful and dominant. The laser guns, with their faster firing speed, longer range, and terrifying might, have now become the secret weapon of various countries. They are indeed able to threaten us." The belle was not as intelligent as Dorit, so she shifted her sight to the distance and said, "Well, let's not entertain ourselves with such fancy thoughts, shall we? Let's just watch and wait for them to destroy each other. Perhaps there is some good stuff from the 3-star vestige that can benefit us as ability users." "I don't mind giving you some if we get any," replied Dorit in a deep voice, "but if we don't get any, the conditions we've agreed on can't be changed." "Got it." At the vast sea, except for the scenes of slaughter on the several liners and the scenes around them, the surface of the sea farther away was much calmer. However, unnoticed by all parties involved, the subaquatic corvette had appeared under the passenger ship. Inside the cabin, Tang Xiu's hands tapped on the virtual keyboard, inputting a series of instructions quickly. He then looked at Cheng Xueme and said, "You stay here. Xiao Xue and I will go to the rescue. Do remember, do not tamper with any of the control devices in this subaquatic corvette. The AI has been protected with my fingerprints and retina scans, no one but me can control it. If you try to, you'll be attacked by the hidden weapons in the pilot house. How about I join the battle and rescue?" Cheng Xueme nodded, yet still asked. Tang Xiu headed to the cabin hatch while interrupting her, "You're still on a mission, so you can't appear in front of anyone else for a while. Also, you haven't yet been able to fully control your power. The current you going with us now will not help us, it would just be a burden. Just obey and stay here." Cheng Xueme was a bit embarrassed, but she still nodded without arguing back. She knew that Tang Xiu was telling the truth. She wouldn't be able to help and might actually be a burden with her current ability. As the hatch of the subaquatic corvette was opened, an energy shield layer activated half a meter towards the outside, blocking the great pressure from the sea. Tang Xiu and Gu Xiaoxue then flashed out from the energy shield and the cabin hatch automatically closed. The deep sea was very dark, and they cruised upward against the enormous pressure of the sea to surface. Kill those 4. 3 water elementalists manipulated a surging water prison on the deck to trap 4 members of the Tang family's second guardian squad. Ice arrows were condensed from seawater and easily penetrated the water wall, shooting powerfully at the 4 people inside. One of the 4 members of the second guardian squad covered his bleeding left arm. Despite the bulging veins on his forehead and the frantic killing intent in his eyes, he had no way to break out of the water prison, so he could only leave the other 3 to dodge the sharp ice arrows while they tried to help him resist the barrage of them. "Don't worry about me. You all just find a way to break out," shouted the man. Puff. Just as his voice fell, an ice arrow shot the abdomen of a middle-aged man who protected him, sending him flying a few meters backward, blood splashing out as he heavily fell to the floor. The 4 people instantly fell into deep despair. They were completely aware that it was nearly impossible to break out of the water prison with their power alone. Even if they did, they would still have to face a constant barrage of attacks from the enemy without any means to strike back. Whoosh! A lightning-fast silhouette streaked up to the sky near the edge of the nearby ship. A blinding sword light flashed down, slashing the waists of the 3 French ability users without them noticing. A long sword was dancing in the air around Tang Xiu. After killing 3 ability users in a flash, he didn't stop at all as his speedy figure appeared again near the other 2. Die. The sword light flashed again. Even though the 2 ability users noticed Tang Xiu a step before, they could only hurriedly set up a defensive measure, causing them to still be turned into dozens of pieces by the violet sword light. At the other side. The moment Gu Xiaoxue rushed out of the seawater, the water on her body instantly evaporated. Her white dress fluttered as layers of sword mirages that looked like silvery streams of light flashed down from the 9th heaven, demolishing the 2 French ability users in a flash. At the moment that their flesh and blood splashed in the air, she rushed through the mist of blood and seemingly launched a hefty punch on the back of a French ability user. "Everyone be careful." The stocky man, who was being besieged by the 2 experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall, was on the verge of collapsing. He had been heavily injured, and now that he suddenly found 2 new killing gods appear, his spirit chilled over. At the door to the liner cabin, Tang Guisheng and Tang Min, who were being protected by the 2 experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall, were immediately overjoyed. They clearly saw the figure of a newly arrived person. In particular, Tang Guisheng was overjoyed. All of his worries and his restlessness vanished after finding that the new powerhouse turned out to be his grandson, Tang Xiu. "Kill these bastards, Xiu." Tang Xiu smiled in response to Tang Guisheng. His figure kept flashing, and each time he launched a strike, an ability user was either killed or severely wounded. "You 2 don't need to protect us anymore," blurted Tang Guisheng. "Move with Xiu and kill these French ability users as fast as you can." The experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall exchanged glances and tacitly nodded, then quickly hurled toward the nearest ability users. They used to be powerhouses who survived from seas of blood and piles of corpses. With their abundant experience, they were still vigilantly surveying the situation in the surroundings while slaughtering the French ability users. They then immediately retreated from combat to fend off the attacks from ability users who attempt to kill Tang Guisheng and Tang Min. The flow of battle, which once seemed like the Tang family greatly weakening, ultimately turned into a one-sided massacre due to the sudden appearance of Tang Xiu and Gu Xiaoxue. The French ability users were now unable to fight back. Finally, the bulky Frenchman realized that victory was no longer possible for his side, so he went all out to force the 2 experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall to draw back at the cost of 2 bloody wounds. He then sped away toward the speedboat hung on the side hull of the ship. Leaving? Dream on. The long sword crisscrossed. The two men joined hands and simultaneously slapped their swords' hilt. The two long swords streaked forward like shooting stars and pierced the back of the stocky man in the blink of an eye. Bam! The powerful man fell into despair as he felt his heart pierced. His life force and strength quickly dissipated while regrets now filled his heart. It was greed that drove him to snatch the treasures of the 3-star vestige from the Chinese, and that greed had become the very reason he ended up with a tragic death here. Run. The complexion of another water elementalist was that of complete disaster. He could only watch helplessly as his leader was killed, causing his fighting spirit to flush down the drain. After screaming, he fled to the distance in a flash and jumped into the water where the Tang family's experts couldn't chase him. The less than 20 remaining French ability users looked desperate. Their abilities were not of the water attribute, making it very difficult for them to survive in the vast sea. Puff. 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 Having lost the will to fight, except for the nearly 10 ability users who jumped into the sea in an attempt to escape as fast as possible, everyone was slaughtered in just half a minute. At this moment, the deck of the two liners was painted with blood. Many dead bodies were badly mangled, making it a very miserable scene to behold. Tang Xiu then quickly came to the front of Tang Guisheng and inquired, "How can you be here, Grandpa?" Tang Guisheng was in an excellent mood at the moment. Although the Tang family lost a lot of their elite experts, his grandson was safe and sound, making him feel greatly relaxed as he answered, "Why else if not because of you?" Chapter 8:19, Seeking World Hegemony? After an explanation, Tang Xiu finally knew the whole truth to the matter. He didn't blame Duan Mulin for the misinformation since anyone else would also think that he had been stranded and died inside the vestige due to the entire place being closed off. He kept his expression calm and tranquil, a stark contrast to his heart full of emotions. He was feeling touched as his grandfather, Tang Guisheng, had practically mobilized an army of the Tang family's experts and led them himself to rush out. They were even almost annihilated at sea. The feeling was so warm that he felt like the warmness was flowing into every part of his body and into each nook and cranny of his soul, causing him to feel an incomparable mental comfort. "You should have believed in my ability, Grandpa. I dare not boast about anything, but know that only a handful of people on Earth can kill me." Tang Guisheng looked empty for a moment. His eyes were full of joy, but he still rebuked, "Conceitedness leads to carelessness and stupid mistakes, you hear? I know that you're an immortal cultivator and quite powerful, but even a tiger still needs to doze off. And who can guard against contingency, brat? This old man traversed a far distance just to rush here, but you're still complaining to me?" Tang Su was flushed red and felt a bit embarrassed, but he still smilingly replied, How would I dare to blame you, Grandpa? It's just that paternal aunt told me that you didn't even tell anyone why you left the whole Tang family behind to rush here with our men. I'd be very distressed if you were to have any accidents because of me, you see." "Nah. No worries. There won't be a problem even though I left the family without explaining why." Tang Guisheng nodded with satisfaction and said, "Even if I were to encounter an accident, your uncle can be the backbone of our Tang family. Besides, your second and third grandpa are still there to assist him, so there won't be any problems. Besides, I just heard a recent rumor that involved you." "What rumor?" asked Tang Xiu, surprised. Tang Guisheng probed with a meaningful expression. "I heard you have a very powerful disciple, so powerful that even Duan Mulin was suppressed and wasn't able to lift his head." Tang Xiu was stunned and replied quizzically, "I do have a very powerful disciple, but how does it have a thing to do with Duan Mulin? I don't get it." Grand Master." To the side, Gu Xiaoxue coughed a bit and smilingly said, "When Master and I were on the way to the Strait of Malacca, we met the China Special Ability Bureau's people, including that Duan Mulin you mentioned. Master, well, kinda used a bit of her power to frighten them." Tang Xiu stared blankly and quickly asked, she didn't mention my name, did she? She naturally mentioned you, Grand Master, answered Gu Xiaoxue with a smile. Else, how would we figure out your situation? Tang Xiu could only feel helpless. He didn't want to expose his relationship with the Everlasting Feast Hall, at least not yet. But Gu Yan's actions had practically revealed what he had been trying to hide. It was likely that all of the big shots in the country must have learned about his relationship with the Everlasting Feast Hall now. Sighing inwardly, Tang Xiu asked again, you said Yan used a bit of her power and scared the members of the Special Ability Bureau? You also know how strong Master is, Grand Master. Gu Xiaoxue gently nodded. Her power is way too powerful in the eyes of outsiders. Tang Xiu nodded. Since Gu Yan had practically shown how tough they were and frightened the members of the Special Ability Bureau, outsiders should have learned that they were not, by any means, a pushover. It didn't matter if it made those people wary, and they now guarded against himself and the Tang family, as he had no intention to take over the position of the country's ruler by force. If the power exposed by Yan was strong to the point that it was enough to make Duanmu Lin feel despair and helplessness, it's highly likely that this will produce dread and fear in those big shots' minds towards me. Come to think of it, it's not necessarily a good thing either, as I'll still need to have some dealings with people to continue with my future plans. But it's enough now that we have the safety of the magnificent Tang Corporation, the Everlasting Feast Hall, and the Tang family, as they wouldn't dare to have any crooked ideas against us now. As he thought up to that point, a smile appeared on his face. He then looked at Tang Guisheng and asked, is this also the kind of rumor you've heard, Grandpa? It's more than that. Tang Guisheng shook his head and smilingly said, Duanmu Lin is the leader of the Chinese Special Ability Bureau, and he personally issued an imperial decree that no one must provoke the Everlasting Feast Hall, the Tang family, and the magnificent Tang Corporation. The heads of several major families in the capital have received the news by now. Tang Xiu couldn't help but let out a strange smile. It seemed that his treasured disciple had completely terrified people out of their wits. To think that a dignified, distinguished big shot, the leader of the Special Ability Bureau, Duanmu Lin, was forced to issue such an order. The decree meant that he could practically do anything and go anywhere in the country unhindered. Tang Min, who was sitting to the side, asked, Xiu, news passed on from Haiben Island says that all the passages to the 3-star vestige have been closed and you never came out. You also note that the vestige is located in the depths of the Strait of Malacca. Without boarding a submarine, nobody can withstand the pressure of the seawater, yet you were still able to come out. How did you do that? A smile was outlined on the corners of Tang Xiu's mouth as he replied, well, since you're asking, I shall take you to a certain place, Auntie. Also, I have good news to tell you too. Going somewhere? Where to? Asked Tang Min. Come with me, said Tang Xiu. A few minutes later, Tang Xiu and Gu Xiaoxue took Tang Guisheng and Tang Min to the liner's deck. Tang Xiu grabbed Tang Guisheng and Tang Min's hands as Tang Xiu released his qi to envelope everyone before jumping into the sea. After descending for dozens of meters, the 4 people came to the front of the subaquatic corvette. Tang Xiu inputted a series of instructions outside the cabin hatch as an energy shield pushed against the seawater half a meter outside the hatch. Then, Tang Xiu quickly led Tang Guisheng and Tang Min into the interior. Heavens! What's this? Tang Min stared with wide eyes that were bigger than a bell, which were glimmering with flashes of shock and surprise. Tang Guisheng was doing slightly better than her, even though he was similarly shocked. The facilities and technology inside the subaquatic corvette were far more advanced than today's tech, causing their hearts to race. This is a subaquatic corvette I obtained from the 3-star vestige, the base established by the remnants of the Starnet Empire. I was able to smoothly leave the 3-star vestige without being noticed by anyone because of this item. By the way, Cheng Xueme. Let me introduce you to my grandpa, and this is my auntie. At this time, Cheng Xueme had just walked out of the pilot house. She was slightly stunned upon seeing Tang Guisheng and Tang Min. After hearing Tang Xiu introduce her to them, she was instantly shocked as she had seen Tang Guisheng and Tang Min on TV numerous times. She knew that the duo was the head of the Tang family and his daughter. Grandpa Tang, Auntie Tang, greeted Cheng Xueme with a bit of respect, though she was suppressing her shock inside. Tang Guisheng was actually surprised seeing Cheng Xueme appear here but didn't show it on his face. He just smiled in response and nodded. Tang Min, on the other hand, wore a suspicious look and asked, "Your name is Cheng Xueme? Why do I feel like you're quite familiar?" "I have met you with my mother before," answered Cheng Xueme. "Your mother? Who's she?" asked Tang Min quizzically. Cheng Xueme didn't answer. She didn't want to recall the affairs with her parents and was even more reluctant to mention them with outsiders, though she knew that her mother was Tang Min's best friend since childhood. Tang Xiu, however, knew something about Cheng Xueme's situation. He realized that she didn't want to mention her mother, and then immediately interjected, "Auntie, I still have an important issue that I need to tell you about, which is also the main reason why I brought you here." "What important issue, exactly?" asked Tang Min with a slight frown. "Before I tell you, you must promise that you will never tell anyone about this but the closest core members of the Tang family," said Tang Xiu. Tang Guisheng realized the importance of what Tang Xiu was about to tell them, so he straightforwardly said, "With your words, we know what to say and what we should not." Tang Xiu nodded and said, "I've fully controlled the entirety of the 3-star vestige and am now its owner. I can enter it whenever I want to, and naturally can use everything inside it." "What did you say?" abruptly exclaimed Tang Guisheng, full of shock and amazement, yet also with disbelief. Tang Xiu repeated his statement and finally said, "I'm telling you the truth. The 3-star vestige is the remains left behind by the race from the Starnet Empire of the Black Cloud Star region, in the Potterit Galaxy. Speaking accurately, it's a fleet from the Starnet Empire that became fugitives and eventually fled to Earth. They rushed to establish an underwater base here, but eventually died because they were unable to adapt." "Was it due to an abrupt change of the catastrophic climate?" asked Tang Guisheng rapidly. "It was caused by the movement of the tectonic plates, which led to a volcanic eruption and mass extinction," said Tang Xiu. Tang Guisheng fell silent. The Earth itself has experienced countless natural disasters, a subject that scientists are continually researching. Never did he expect that there was also an extraterrestrial race that suffered such a catastrophic blow here on Earth. "Exactly what things are there inside the 3-star vestige that can be of use to us, Xiu?" asked Tang Min. That was what she wanted to ask the most. "For instance, imagine our family wants to seek hegemony all over the world. We can achieve it by relying on this 3-star vestige. There are technologies far beyond what the Earth has. Putting it shortly, there's everything that's essential for a race to survive." Tang Guisheng was shaken and was rendered speechless for a very long time, whereas Tang Min deeply frowned as she stared at Tang Xiu and asked, "What about you, Xiu? Do you want to dominate and rule Earth?" "No. I'm not interested." Tang Xiu shook his head and said, "I can achieve such a feat even if there's no 3-star vestige given some time. Only cultivation is most important to me." "Then how do you plan to solve this 3-star vestige issue?" asked Tang Min again. "I seriously think that we should not announce anything about the 3-star vestige to the public for the time being, especially since we don't even need to use it." Tang Xiu looked at Tang Guisheng and seriously explained, "However, I brought a lot of good things from it, so if the country is willing to exchange some objects for me to have, I can take out some of the crudest texts that I obtained there." Chapter 820, Completely Annihilated. Tang Guisheng highly approved of Tang Xiu's suggestion. In spite of the fact that his grandson controlled the entire 3-star vestige, he understood the truth that no human could swallow more than he could chew. Those big shots in China were not necessarily able to endure their greed when meeting such powerful technology. Who among them wouldn't use it to assemble a powerful army to destroy the balance of world powers and become the ruler of the world? "So, what do you need the most now, Xiu?" Tang Guoxing knew that his grandson was a cultivator, so he began to wonder about what would benefit him the most. Tang Xiu pondered for a while and slowly said, "I need time." Tang Guoxing was stunned and asked again, "How long?" "At the very least, more than 10 years, answered Tang Xiu. "The current Earth has a minimal number of cultivation resources, resulting in my cultivation progressing at a crawl. Grandpa, as long as I have enough time, I can make sure nothing will threaten the Tang family, regardless of the balance of world powers in the future." Tang Guoxing nodded without a word, yet he felt that the 10 years his grandson needed was too short. It wouldn't be long enough for him to cultivate and become a true powerhouse. For example, the Amur tiger, Dong Beihu. How much time of his 200 years in life did he spend cultivating? All right. Let's put this all together and see what we can do to make our country more powerful. But we must not overdo it and make them become powerful too quickly. All right. Immediately after, the grandfather and grandson duo began discussing as Tang Xiu took out a lot of items from his interspatial ring. After inspecting each object, they finally determined what several types of them were. In addition to the subaquatic corvette they were now on, they picked up a kind of manufacturing device that could produce consumer goods, as well as several energy crystals. This subaquatic corvette we are riding on has more than a dozen weapon configurations. The one that is the most powerful is the underwater laser cannon, as it can blast an entire small island. Hence, I'm going to dismantle its main gun and leave behind some other less powerful weapon systems. I believe that after the executives of our country obtain this subaquatic corvette, 3 to 5 years of researching it won't be enough to achieve a notable result. Even if they can research it thoroughly in 8 to 10 years, they would be able to use the scientific and technological achievements. They have researched to manufacture a large number of subaquatic corvettes, so we don't need to worry about it, concluded Tang Xiu at the end of discussion. Tang Guoxing nodded with satisfaction and smilingly said, "Well, I know that our country's top officials will grin ear to ear even if we give them this subaquatic corvette with half of its weapons dismantled. For what reason can our country not become the most powerful country in the world? Is there anything forbidding it to be first in military power? Is possessing powerful weapons a mistake? We're Chinese nationals, so it's natural that we want our country to possess stronger weapons and improve our country's army to the highest extent possible. But then, I would hope that the high-level officials of our country are not blinded with ambition later," said Tang Xiu with a smile. Even if he spoke like that, he could tell that once China's military power became the strongest in the world and surpassed the United States, the big shots in China would definitely implement some plans that would, at the very least, cause some changes to the current balance of the world. China was like a sleeping lion. It was getting stronger after its awakening and was currently a first-world country. But a lion would always be a lion. Regardless of how many years a lion stayed calm in its territory, it would definitely want to establish itself in the vast territory of the entire forest once its strength was at its peak. Tang Xiu also wished for his country to become stronger and more powerful, but he needed more time to make himself stronger first. He realized that before he gained the ability to ascend in the future, his time to play on this planet hadn't finished yet. Knock, knock. A knock was at the door, and Cheng Xueme, who didn't participate in the discussion, moved inside. She looked at Tang Xiu and quickly said, "The sensor just showed a holographic image of some people approaching us. If I guess correctly, they should be Americans." Tang Xiu and Tang Guoxing exchanged glances, and both wore a surprised expression. But Tang Min was puzzled and asked, "Americans are approaching us? Are they like those French ability users, wanting to rob us of the precious objects from the 3-star vestige?" "They should be," replied Tang Guoxing thoughtfully. "The United States has always seen itself as the hegemon of the world. Not to mention that all the powerhouses they dispatched were completely annihilated in the 3-star vestige, and in addition, it's impossible to send out another expedition to gain any more treasures. Hence, I'm guessing that they are now targeting the precious objects from the vestige that have been obtained by other countries' expedition teams." Let's go to the pilot house and have a look, interjected Tang Xiu. Afterward, the 5 people came to the pilot house and watched the footage displayed on the virtual holographic screen. A cold gleam flashed in Tang Xiu's eyes since dozens of people on the U.S. cargo ship were obviously not just average people. The looks that they had when watching the 2 liners clearly expressed their evil intention. These Americans are really brazen, just because their country is strong and has advanced weapons, said Tang Guisheng coldly. Do you see that man atop the roof of the cargo ship? His name is Dorit, the Golden Shield leader of USA's Special Ability Bureau. His position is similar to Duanmu Lin's but with higher privileges. How did you know that, father? Asked Tang Min, puzzled. I used to work in the Confidential Archives Department, so I naturally saw some special intel files, answered Tang Guisheng. There are records about this Dorit, but they didn't contain much. But then why weren't you able to recognize the identity of any French ability users back then, though? Asked Tang Min curiously. The French ability users are a very low-key bunch, Tang Guisheng shook his head and said. The fact that France has established its own Special Ability Bureau is also news to me. I don't even know who the person in charge is, nor do I know how many ability users they have. Also, those French are not as aggressive as the Americans, so naturally we've been paying more attention to the intelligence towards the USA. Tang Min caught the gist quickly. She looked at Tang Xiu and asked, how do we deal with them, Xiu? Tang Xiu was silent for a while and then slowly said, if Grandpa doesn't like them and we don't want any more casualties, then we can only annihilate them. Tang Guisheng was still before he quizzically asked, there's no way we can avoid casualties if we must fight them, right? Those Americans are not, by any means, paper tigers. Aren't you boasting a bit too much, Xiu? A smile appeared on Tang Xiu's face. His hands quickly tapped on the virtual keyboard as he set up a series of instructions. At the same time, all the turrets of the guns installed on the 20-plus meter-long subaquatic corvette's hull began to adjust their aim. Meanwhile, the weapon power generator began to run at full steam. 6 kilometers away, the cargo ship was slowly approaching the 2 anchored liners. Dorit stood atop the roof of the cargo ship. There was uncertainty on his face while his fingers steadily stroked his chin gently. The smiling Belle that stood next to him already had her smile gone, replaced by a look of seriousness. You have to consider it again, Dorit. There were originally 4 powerful experts on those 2 Chinese liners, and later came 2 more experts that are much more powerful. Just by relying on those 6, they can completely overpower us. The one who'll be completely annihilated will be us if we attack them, said the beauty in a cold voice. Dorit turned to look at the Belle, then took a deep breath and said, I know that the enemy is very powerful. I admit that I won't be able to handle the original 4 experts, whereas those 2 people who appeared later are also probably stronger than me. But don't forget what our modified cargo ship has been equipped with. I have made up my mind to approach them and unleash it immediately. The beauty was silent for a few seconds and finally nodded slowly. She naturally knew what kind of weapon had been installed on the modified cargo ship. But can the torpedoes blow up those 2 liners? Can those naval mines completely kill or cause heavy damages to those powerful people? The beautiful woman still faintly worried inside. You know, those Chinese have an old saying that I love the most. Do you want me to say it? Dorit shook his head and asked. What do you want to say, exactly? Asked the Belle, curious. They say that you won't be able to catch a cub if you don't enter a tiger's den, said Dorit in a deep voice. We'll ultimately get nothing if we give up this plan because we are afraid of their combat force. Besides, if those Chinese experts bring the objects they obtained from the 3-star vestige to their country, we can expect the Chinese military power to surpass us within a few years. By then, they will take away our biggest asset. As the beautiful woman opened her mouth and was about to concur with Dorit's argument, a nagging and restless feeling suddenly erupted inside her heart, causing all the hairs on her body to stand upright. Run. The beautiful woman didn't know what danger it was or where it came from, but she instantly dashed to the side towards the sea. She then grabbed an iron chain on the hull and twisted it off to forcefully pull down a small boat. Boom! The huge explosion created torrential blasts of waves as the whole cargo ship was blown up in an instant. Apart from a handful of the American ability users who had sensed that something was amiss, the other tens of ability users from the USA Special Ability Bureau were either heavily injured or dead after the explosion. Inside the subaquatic corvette, Tang Guisheng and Tang Min were shocked by the cannon's attack. They learned from Tang Xiu that it was not even the subaquatic corvette's main gun. If it was a blast from the main weapon, wouldn't it only need one shot to annihilate the other party completely? Well, this is just the start of a good show, though, said Tang Xiu smilingly. I've already activated the intelligent tracking and locking system. Those American ability users won't be able to run anywhere. Cheng Xueme, who stood behind Tang Xiu, hurriedly said, are you perhaps not going to leave behind some of them to obtain intel from, like regarding the American Special Ability Bureau?